to the Turn On Your Inner Light show. It's time to stop just surviving, and it's time to begin to thrive. It's time to live happier and healthier. Turn stress into strength. Noted author Debbie Mandel will show you how to move beyond personal doubts and fears and into positive perception to turn on your inner light. Here's your host, Debbie Mandel.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my show. Our guest expert is David Hanscom, MD, an orthopedic spine surgeon and the author of Back in Control. This is such a wonderful name for the book because you will be surprised to learn what really might be triggering your back pain. And before you go out and see a surgeon or go do back surgery, it will be well worth your while to read Back in Control. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Now, what comes first? Anxiety or anger and then pain, or pain and then follows the anxiety and anger of having that pain?
Well, I think it goes both ways. The way I started to think is that if you put your hand over a hot stove, you become anxious and you pull it away. So if you are forced to hold your hand over the stove, not only do you become anxious, you become very angry. So I figured out a few years ago that pain is very linked with anxiety and anger. And so you really cannot separate those at all. And then we also found out that emotional pain and physical pain are very closely located in about the same part of the brain. So I think that my personal concept is that probably chronic pain is driven by the neurological system most of the time. I think that you have pain causes anxiety, and anxiety causes pain.
So if I'm prone to anxiety, let's say, or depression, or anger, and I get pain, legitimate pain like sciatica, from inflammation, does that loop get intensified so that it kind of sets in neurologically, and even though I should be better, it's been a couple of months and I'm not?
Well, I think you get a cycle set off where everybody has anxiety and frustration. It's universal. There's really nobody who does not have significant anxiety. And many people are very good at covering that up, but it's basically very universal. So then you add in pain as a huge stress, and at the end of the day, pain is really just another stress. And so what happens, pain cranks up your normal anxiety and normal frustration, and I call it the terrifying triad. The three of them are just linked. So I think pain really cranks up your normal anxiety and frustration. The problem is if I can surgically take away the pain, there's so many other reinforcers of anxiety and frustration that those don't necessarily come back down. In fact, they usually don't.
So in other words, what I really liked about your book is you say that even if there is a problematic spine, you want the patient that you're going to do surgery on to really investigate and introspect with this awareness of helicoptering over the self to see what are my emotional triggers, because in the book, Back in Control, you clarified that sometimes, even after a successful surgery, the pain comes back.
Well, and a lot of times it never goes away. And what happens, we look at pain in terms of pathways, and anxiety in terms of pathways, and also anger. So what happens is that you have a source of the pain. It could be a structural problem that you can see, or a soft tissue problem that you can't see, or the brain can actually generate its own pain impulses. It doesn't really matter where the source of the pain comes from. With repetition, these pathways get laid down just like riding a bicycle. So what happens is I try to take the word emotional out of this a little bit. I think in terms of pathways. And I look at anxiety and frustration as basically responses to a stress. And once you have a pathway in your brain where there's pain, anxiety, or frustration, those are permanent pathways. The problem with pain, compared to, for instance, learning to play the piano, is that the pathways come in so quickly, or the impulses come in so quickly, that those pathways get laid down very, very quickly. So in about 3 to 4 months, these pathways are probably permanent. So when I do surgery, I've learned to operate only in structural problems, and then I always deal with the pathways. And if you came to my office on a given day, our success rate approaches probably 90 to 95%, which is a completely different experience for me.
Well, I think that makes so much sense because, first of all, you've eliminated unnecessary surgeries, which don't work because you have integrity, and it's not just about making money. And second of all, I think based on your book, how you advise your patients to really do their due diligence about getting to the root cause of the stressor. I will give you an example why this hit home for me. My cousin had back surgery. It's not a close cousin. We didn't communicate much. And she told me it didn't help and it was really a disaster. And she said, and now she realizes after years of therapy, if the surgeon would have just discussed what was going on in her life, which was a divorce, a very painful divorce based on an abuse as a child, then maybe she wouldn't have needed this whole surgery. But we need to tackle the root cause, don't we?
Well, again, it's a combination of things. So I think what the stress does, it just simply amplifies the signal. So, I mean, the pain is there. I mean, there's no question in my mind, every time, every patient's pain is always there. But when you're stressed out and frustrated, you first of all don't tolerate it very well, but it also adds a lot of complexity to that pain signal. So then people quit sleeping, of course, which both they don't cope with the pain, but it's been shown in research that you actually feel the pain more. So if you're under extreme stress, and not even putting a psychological label on it, but simply under a lot of stress, and pain, of course, tends to make that worse, you just cannot make a decision about surgery, even if it's a structural problem. So even if it's a major structural problem, we still, for at least 6 to 12 weeks, will still put people through the pathways process.
So in other words, if I understand correctly, you first need to get back into balance as a whole being. And sleep, we know from Shakespeare, really repairs the mind and the body, and it's very necessary. It even resets our appetites and our hormones and so forth. And if you're not sleeping, everything will tick you off and the pain will be exacerbated. But I think also you're creating detours for those pathways. Okay, they may be set in stone, but we can take a detour and figure it out. Well, we're going to commercial break, and we will return with Dr. David Hanscom, author of Back in Control.
Now you can take Debbie Mandel home with you. Her book, Turn On Your Inner Life, Fitness for Body, Mind, and Soul, will help you decompress with healthy, positive, concrete solutions. Common life challenges are presented so that you can quickly find the help you need. Emotional tips, original meditations, and a fun and easy-to-follow fitness workout for each mindset. This revolutionary new method will help you rewire mind and body to take back your power. Get it on Amazon.
Are you overwhelmed with the burden of taking care of children, parents, or both? Are you taking care of everyone else except yourself? It's time to change your habits and re-energize. Debbie Mandel gives you an innovative and easy-to-follow program for good health and happiness. In her magical new book, Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout, Debbie Mandel shows you step-by-step how to find the optimal balance between giving and receiving and guides you to exercise and eat right to take care of yourself. What are you waiting for? Read Changing Habits and start training for your life. Life does not need to be a burden. Get Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout on Amazon.
You're listening to the Turn On Your Inner Light show. I'm your host, Debbie Mandel, and I'm speaking with David Hanscom, MD. He's an orthopedic spine surgeon and author of Back in Control. So, David, before commercial break, we were looking at navigating around those pain pathways, taking a detour. So without masking the pain or suppressing it, what do you suggest we do?
Well, it sounds discouraging if these pain pathways are permanent, but they are permanent. In other words, once you know how to ride a bicycle, you cannot unlearn how to ride that bicycle. So you take advantage of the one part of the brain in that you can only do one thing at a time. That's why we're not supposed to text and drive at the same time. So what happens is the same way pathways are formed by pain, you can take the same concepts and you can form pathways around those pathways. So there's many ways of doing this, but the basic one we start with is connecting thoughts with physical sensations. We simply have people write down their negative thoughts and throw them away. It sounds very simple, and it is, but it's incredibly effective. It's actually the foundation of the entire project.
So, what if I don't like writing? What if I'm one of these people that you tell me to write and it takes me back to elementary school where I see all those red marks on my compositions? Is there another way to detoxify the negative thought?
Well, it sounds very simple, but there's a very important sequence. And by the way, we have several hundreds, probably 500 or 600 patients that are absolutely pain-free. And what happens is as you create these detours, you're really shifting the nervous system into a completely different place. So what happens, the two things that don't work is positive thinking and mind over matter. And the results are incredibly positive, but what happens is a sequence of awareness, detachment, and reprogramming. And what the writing does, it creates an awareness and detachment at the same time. And then many of the tools that we're familiar with as far as mindfulness, meditation, visualization is a reprogramming step. But that sequence seems to be very, very critical.
But what if I don't like writing? And what if it's hard to get me to comply with that? Is there a different way for me to reach awareness?
I mean, I have to tell you, I've had very, very few patients go to pain-free without the writing. Mm-hmm. And it's hard because you're writing down just negative thoughts, and people have see what happens, we tend a lot of times suppressing negative thoughts. So when these bitter memories come up, people have a hard time with them. The problem is they're just memories, and they're just links. You actually cannot change those links. So the analogy I use, if you just picture yourself unhooking from a very long train, what happens with the writing, you instantly unhook from the train, which the cars represent your past, and then you can engage in the reprogramming tools full blast like now. Mm-hmm. So I just have seen very few people get better without the writing. And it's hard. People have a hard time starting to write. Yes.
I find that to be, well, look, it depends how motivated you are. Let's say I come to you and I really want to rid myself of this pain and live a happier, healthier life. I'm saying a reasonably happy life. If I'm not going to do what you tell me to do, if I'm not going to take that extra step, then it won't work, right? I mean, I have to participate in this healing, don't I? I have to partner it with you.
Well, the number one variable that we see as far as effectiveness of the project is simply willingness to engage. So what I found out very dramatically the last couple of years is that people often do not want to give up their pain. They identify with it. It's a powerful tool, and people will really become essentially addicted to their pain. And indeed, some centers are actually using an addiction model to deal with chronic pain. So you have a familiar pattern. It's powerful. You are protected from yourself, and you're protected from expectations from others. And it's a tough role to give up. It's a very powerful role.
I could see that. It's, to me, like being a victim. And when I'm a victim, I'm asking you to feel sorry for me, take care of me, right? I mean, right. It kind of legitimizes that. So it's almost like this is my archetypal role. And I have to, pull myself out of it and relabel. So that's why it's important, I guess, as you say, to label your negative thought. Now, what kind of substitute will I put? Because you very well stated, like this upbeat positivism, everything will be wonderful, or just reciting affirmations doesn't work. So once I've labeled my negative thought, and let's say we've identified me as a victim, what do I do? How do I find the way out of that?
So, remember, anxiety and anger are linked. In other words, anger is loss of control, and what causes the need for control is anxiety. So what happened, anxiety represents helplessness, and anger represents control and power, which actually covers up that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So what the writing does is simply separates from the anxiety, the anger. But the anger is the one part of the process that is so powerful. So one part of the process, you have to make a simple decision: I'm not going to be a victim. You first have to acknowledge the fact that you're in the victim role. Most people do not want to use that word in relationship to themselves. So the word victim is a tough one for a lot of people. If you look at this very, very carefully, it's a critical part of the process of becoming aware of your own victimhood. I personally had no awareness until I was about 50 years old. I thought I was Mr. Calm and cool and collected, and I actually told my current wife that I was a good catch because I, quote, had dealt with my anger issues. I wasn't remotely connected to them.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of intellectualized everything? Is that what you're saying? There was kind of a divorce between mind and body?
Absolutely. Was not connected to my anxiety. Actually, unfortunately, my anxiety broke through. What actually put me through the big burnout 15 years ago and how the whole project started, I went through an extreme anxiety reaction. And I did not become a major spine surgeon by having anxiety. I became a major spine surgeon by suppressing anxiety. And what happens around 40 years old, I started having physical reactions based on anxiety. I'm going, what's this? So I was completely disconnected from what was going inside of my brain.
So based on that, it's kind of what Freud did, right? To look at your personal life, your autobiography, be very candid, and physician in healing yourself, you were able to heal others. And when we say healing, we talk about a constant vigilance, I guess, self-monitoring, and taking those detours that you have to establish balance. Now, you wrote something very fascinating in Back in Control. You know how everyone's boosting self-esteem these days? We do it with kids, and we're so narcissistic with Facebook and Twitter. Right. You said self-esteem, there's a problem here, that's one of our root causes for pain. Could you explain that? I was fascinated by it.
And I think self-esteem is an absolute catastrophe. I mean, why I was disconnected from who I was because I was labeling myself as a good doctor, I was compassionate, I was an athlete, I was a scholar. So as you start labeling yourself...
Well, let's hold that thought. I don't want to rush it, but I'm getting the signal to go to commercial break.
Okay.
And we will return with Dr. David Hanscom of Back in Control. And I got to learn about the self-esteem issue. Dear listeners, I'm excited to tell you about my new book, Addicted to Stress. This is the message you need to hear. Are you addicted to stress? Do you do it all while everyone depends on you? Where's all this pressure coming from? It is coming from inside you. This is why my publisher, John Wiley, asked me to write Addicted to Stress, a woman's 7-step program to reclaim joy and spontaneity in life. This fun-to-read book teaches proven strategies to reclaim your life, silence your inner critic, build a healthy body, and reframe your thoughts to change your life for the better. Dare to be happy without the guilt. Addicted to Stress is easy to get. It's available at Barnes & Noble and other fine bookstores everywhere. You can also buy it at Amazon and other online retailers. We're back with Dr. David Hanscom of Back in Control. Okay, talk to me about the problematic self-esteem we all have.
So the problem with self-esteem involves labeling. And what disconnects ourselves from ourselves is labels. It's also what disconnects us from other people. And what happened to me, essentially, is I was forced, not by choice, to be stripped of my labels. So what happens is that, forget about the book for a second. What the book is a framework. And what the book is really about is about connection. It's about connecting to who you are. So what you're doing is you're removing the blocks to connecting to yourself. Once a patient next to who they are, chronic pain or otherwise, is like opening the door of a cage of a wild animal. You cannot stop a person from getting better. Human beings want to thrive. The problem is with anxiety, frustration, and pain, you forget who you are. So not only is the medical profession labeling you, you're labeling yourselves, and your mind is absolutely chaotic. Once you connect, it's game over.
Wow. So, in other words, you're really telling me that in order to be better, I need to find my authentic self. But
Correct.
What's wrong with having self-esteem? See, what's the distinction here?
So the problem with self-esteem, again, it really blocks true awareness. In other words, instead of feeling the breeze, I'm saying, well, this is a nice day. Well, having that little bit of a label, as you know, as true awareness actually takes you away from feeling the breeze. So that's a real simple example, but if you're talking to a group of people and you're worried about how you look to the audience, then that thought actually blocks you from connecting to the audience. So self-esteem is an intellectual exercise that simply involves labeling, and it does not help your self-worth, your sense of enjoying the day. So remember, the whole process here is you can't fix yourself. I mean, the other reason why this process works is you absolutely cannot fix yourself. So you're putting tools into place that allow your brain to heal. As you consistently do these different pathways, tools, your brain actually grows new neurons. So it's called neuroplasticity. You literally can sculpt your new brain. So it's really a huge change. It's actually not a major life philosophy. It's just the way the nervous system works.
And it really has been the buzzword, by the way, of 2012. I mean, we learned about the role of exercise. Rats who do a lot of cardio have, new cells in the brain. We learned about BDNF. We learned about, it's not all set in stone. So we can change the brain. And that's why when I read your book, I said, oh, this is another way, because the past few years we have looked at the brain and a physical ache and how that pathway can be strengthened, and you get into this loop and you think about the lower back that bothers you and it hurts even more. There's a fear that we have about pain. So I think that in targeting all our feelings about it and our anger, Dr. John Sarnow, his first point was, so many years ago, was that he felt back pain is due to repressed anger, and you went even farther with all this and gave us some wonderful tools. Well, I want to thank you for being a terrific guest, informative, and giving us a good pathway. Do you have a website where we can learn about your work?
It's back-in-control.com.
Terrific. Well, be well, and I'm certainly going to have less self-esteem and not take myself too seriously.
That's the key.
That is the key. Affirmation of the week. Home is the place where you are free to be your authentic self. And now for the latest medical trends. Sugar and fat contribute to conditions like osteoporosis, as these foods coat the intestines and block calcium absorption, thereby weakening our bones. Who knew? If you are drinking alcohol, and I suspect many of us are, you might want to reach for some asparagus. According to a study in the Journal of Food Science, asparagus may aid the body in accelerating the metabolism of alcohol. Okay, let's try it. Adults who had parents who struggled with addiction, unemployment, and divorce are 10 times more likely to have been victims of childhood physical abuse, according to a study prepared by the University of Toronto's Faculty of Social Work. And I just read this before we aired, that chicken soup does help fight the flu. Yet another study, there's an ingredient in the soup based on the chicken and the vegetables we tend to put in it. Now, I'm not a chef by any means, but most people put in parsnips, parsley, celery, carrots, a sweet potato. So there's this ingredient called carnosine in the chicken soup, which boosts our immune system. But you can't have like one bowl of it. You have to have it consistently throughout the day to help deal with noxious viruses and the flu. And according to the Mayo Clinic, men with fibromyalgia often go undiagnosed because women tend to be diagnosed with this disease. So if men come in with musculoskeletal pain, they're diagnosed differently. And you know what? It's a difficult disease anyway to pin a diagnosis on because there's symptoms like pain, fatigue, problems sleeping, memory, and mood issues that can overlap all these symptoms and be mistaken for something else. And each year, thousands of people are treated in emergency room departments for heart attacks, broken bones, and other incidents related to snow shoveling. Please be careful and do it properly, or get someone else to do it. Well, we come to the close of another show. I have an educational website on stress management, totally free. TurnOnYourInnerLight.com. And all the radio shows with the guest experts are archived for your listening pleasure. Just click on the link. It takes you right into YouTube. Subscribe to my free newsletter from TurnOnYourInnerLight.com. You'll get the latest radio show, a fresh new article on stress management, and the radio, all these health tips that I forget to mention or don't have the time to mention, fully delineated in the newsletter from TurnOnYourInnerLight.com. So have a wonderful week and see you on the radio.